And we are back for Overanalyzing House of the Dragon with part 21 of how it came to be that Rhaenyra's Blacks faced off against Aegon's Greens in the Dance of the Dragons. Powers have been working to keep Rhaenys, Daemon, and Rhaenyra off the throne, which has caused them all to align. The children of Rhaenyra and Laenor have been betrothed to the children of Daemon and Laena. And then came the year of the Red Spring. Laena has died from pregnancy complications, but more is to come. And so let's continue. Lady Laena's death was the first tragedy of 120 AC, but it would not be the last. For this was to be a year when many of the long-simmering tensions and jealousies that had plagued the Seven Kingdoms finally came to a boil. A year when many and more would have reason to wail and grieve and rend their garments. Though none more than the sea snake, Lord Corlys Velaryon, and his noble wife, Princess Rhaenys, who might have been a queen. And so here we are in the year 120. It's a doozy of a year with a number of tragedies. We have the death of Laena, the death of Laenor, the loss of Aemon's Eye, and the deaths of Harwin and Lionel Strong. The entire year of 120 is called the Year of the Red Spring. However, the tragedies all occur within a very short period of time, about 3 months, which is astonishing. The close proximity of events does make one think that these events are somehow related, and certainly Gyldain claims that these events are connected, that they were the result of long-simmering tension and jealousy, that the feud between Rhaenyra and Alicent caused all of these events to occur. And we will get into how likely that idea is, but Gyldain also brings up the possibility of schemes and nefarious actors behind everything, and that deserves its own examination. It didn't seem to be a factor in Laena's death. That seemed to be a bona fide accident, and Gyldain doesn't claim otherwise. But maybe the other events? But with all of that said, and not to get ahead of ourselves, the tragedies of the Year of the Red Spring are less connected than one might think. The Lord of the Tides and his lady were still in mourning for their beloved daughter when the stranger came again, to carry off their son. Sir Laenor Velaryon, husband to the Princess Rhaenyra and the putative father of her children, was slain whilst attending a fair in Spicetown, stabbed to death by his friend and companion, Sir Carl Corey. The two men had been quarreling loudly before blades were drawn. Merchants at the fair told Lord Velaryon when he came to collect his son's body. Corey had fled by then, wounding several men who tried to hinder him. Some claimed a ship had been waiting for him offshore. He was never seen again. And so next we hear about the death of Laenor, who, by the way, in this paragraph is called the putative father of Rhaenyra's children. Putative means generally believed or acknowledged, by the way, which seems to go against the idea that a large number of people believed Rhaenyra's children were bastards, or that they were obviously bastards. It was generally accepted that they were trueborn, so the opinions of Mushroom, Mellos, and the Greens are the clear minority, while the opinions of Eustace and the Blacks are the majority. Anyway, Laenor is murdered, and we once again have differing testimony on what exactly happened. The big problem here is that all three of our main sources, Mellos, Eustace, and Mushroom, were not there. Each of them had no idea what happened and are speculating and reporting rumors. In fact, the true sources on what happened are merchants at Spicetown. Whatever the case, the person that Gyldain clearly blames is Carl Corey, though I will say there is reason to doubt this, and Gyldain says that Laenor was killed after an argument at a fair. A medieval fair, by the way, is a large mercantile exchange. Not that there wasn't entertainment going on, like plays, jugglers, and jousts, but Laenor was most likely there on business, not recreation. Let's remember that his sister did just die. Now, there is a story of a ship waiting for Carl offshore, which definitely invokes the murder of Joffrey. Dantos and Sansa flee a murder scene to find a ship waiting for them. So as readers, we are definitely primed to believe that there is a conspiracy going on of some sort. Anyway, let's go through our testimonies and try to riddle out what actually happened. The circumstances of the murder remain a mystery to this day. Grand Maester Mellos writes only that Sir Laenor was killed by one of his own household knights, after a quarrel. Septon Eustace provides us with the killer's name, and declares jealousy the motive for the slaying. Laenor Velaryon had grown weary of Sir Carl's companionship, and had grown enamored of a new favourite, a handsome young squire of 6 and 10. Mushroom, as always, favors the most sinister theory, suggesting that Prince Daemon paid Carl Corey to dispose of Princess Rhaenyra's husband, arranged for a ship to carry him away, then cut his throat and fed him to the sea. A household knight of relatively low birth, Corey was known to have a lord's tastes and a peasant's purse, and was given to extravagant wagering besides, which lends a certain credence to the fool's version of events. Yet there was no shred of proof, then or now, though the sea snake offered a reward of 10,000 golden dragons for any man who could lead him to Sir Carl Corey, or deliver the killer to a father's vengeance. So Melos is the first to report on the matter, and only says that a household knight killed Laenor after a quarrel. Now it's very interesting that Carl Corey's name is excluded from Melos' report, especially when Gyldayn states it as fact that Carl Corey was the killer. Let's remember that Melos already stated that he believed Laenor was gay and thinks Rhaenyra's children are bastards. He is clearly a Green supporter, and mentioning that Laenor died in a lover's spat helps push that message. Yet he doesn't do that. He's not comfortable blaming Carl Corey. And this is interesting as later we find out that Corlys himself was looking for Carl Corey. Though that sentence is very weird. The sea snake offered a reward of 10,000 golden dragons for any man who could lead him to Carl Corey or deliver the killer to a father's vengeance. The way that is written, there is ambiguity whether Carl is the killer or not. It could be that Carl was sought out for questioning on where the true killer could be. Now again, Gyldayn straight up tells us that Carl is the killer, but the lack of Carl's name with Melos' testimony and the ambiguity in Corlys' bounty does make one wonder if somehow it could not be Carl. Now, on top of the missing killer's name, the wording "after a quarrel" is a bit ambiguous. After a quarrel with whom? With each other? Or a quarrel with others? Also, it's quite notable that they die after a quarrel, not in a quarrel. In other places in Ice and Fire, people die in quarrels, not after quarrels. In fact, this time distinction is done twice. Earlier, the merchants reported that the two had been quarreling, not that they were quarreling. They use the past perfect tense instead of the past tense. It's subtle and it may be nothing, but the word choice is curious. Did they have a quarrel cool down and then get into a fight? And was the fight even with each other? The way Melos' story is written, the death could have very well happened after the argument and involved a different household knight. Anyway, let's continue on to Septon Eustace. Eustace gives us the killer's name and jealousy as the motive. And then Gyldayn proceeds to not give us the name, and we get a semicolon and a story of Laenor growing weary of Carl's companionship while being enamored by a new favorite. Technically speaking, someone else could be the killer in this situation. That said, Gyldayn misrepresenting Eustace to such a large degree would be a bit much. Presumably, in story, people can open up Eustace's history and read the name. If it's not Carl Corey, Gyldayn is exposed. So, yes, despite the weird wording, we should probably accept that Eustace thinks Carl Corey is the killer. Now, I will say that Eustace passing on a story of a lover's quarrel is a tad odd for him. It's Mushroom's testimony that Laenor and Carl were in a relationship. Eustace, on the other hand, thinks Laenor and Rhaenyra's children are trueborn and that Laenor fathered Adam and Alan of Hull, so one would think he would discount stories of Laenor being gay. Though of course it's completely possible that Eustace simply thought that Laenor was bisexual. Now, I will say, Eustace's story, on the face of it, doesn't really sound accurate. Laenor was said to prefer spending time with men his own age, not young boys, and he was a sentimental and devoted individual, naming a child after Joffrey Lonmouth 3 years after Lonmouth's death. Yes, we have very limited information, and people change, and people do all sorts of things that are out of character, but dumping Carl for a 16-year-old squire doesn't really sound like Laenor. It sounds like a story that plays on gay stereotypes meant to bash Laenor. Additionally, the timing seems off. Just after the death of one's sister is an odd time to suddenly seek out new companionship. But perhaps most striking is that it's a lover's spat in public. The gay characters that we know of in Ice and Fire keep things very much a secret. And finally, we get Mushroom's story, that Carl was hired by Daemon to kill Laenor, and that the ship waiting for Corey was set up for him, but once aboard, Daemon kills Corey. It's essentially the story of Littlefinger and Dantos. Now again, Mushroom wasn't there and is just making stuff up, but we should see if he perhaps guessed correctly. So I will say that Mushroom's version does have the strength of providing an excellent motive. We know that Daemon wanted to marry Rhaenyra. He seemed to have wanted to marry her years ago, and after the death of Laenor, he quickly gets married to Rhaenyra within a couple months. Absolutely, Daemon had motive, especially if you believe that Daemon wanted to produce more dragon-riding children, or if he wanted to produce the prince that was promised, or if you believe that he wanted power and wanted to be king consort. Daemon absolutely benefited from Laenor's death, and it would make sense for Daemon to kill him. After all, he killed Laena's betrothed and married her. The one problem is, the plan is stupid. And when I say stupid, I mean outrageously stupid. So, Carl Corey is a household knight to House Velaryon, and at least a very good friend, if not lover, to Laenor. So, how on earth would Daemon go about hiring Carl? Say Daemon knew Carl was desperate for money, he's still asking a man to go against the house he's pledged to support for and murder his good friend or lover. How did he know Carl would say yes and agree to the plan, rather than, say, reporting Daemon to Laenor or Corlys? This is very different than, say, Littlefinger hiring Dantos. Dantos had no loyalty to Joffrey. Or the Catspaw, who had no loyalty to Bran. But say Daemon does get Carl on board. Carl is again Laenor's good friend, if not lover. Carl has ample opportunity to kill Laenor in all sorts of situations. For example, when Laenor was sleeping and Carl was guarding, or if the two went on a private ride together, or if the two went to the bathroom together. Yet for some reason, Carl chooses the middle of a public fair? Then he has to fight his way to a ship that's waiting for him for what? At best, a life on the run for the rest of his life? Carl supposedly needed the money to pay off gambling debts, but he could simply run from the gambling debts for the rest of his life as well. It doesn't make any sense. Now yes, this murder is paralleled with Dantos and Joffrey, and that murder plan was also really stupid, but at least in that situation, Dantos didn't think he could publicly kill Joffrey himself and then fight his way to a ship. Not to mention Carl's ship, which is filled with crew members who can rat Daemon out or be caught themselves. The plan is ridiculously risky and needlessly so. And so we find that again, both Eustace and Mushroom's tales aren't really believable. So what likely did happen? Well, the probable cause for Laenor's death is given in the paragraph. You see, we are actually told who Carl is as a person. We get the following description. A household knight of relatively low birth, Corey was known to have a lord's tastes and a peasant's purse, and was given to extravagant wagering besides. Now, we all know what happens with extravagant wagering. Eventually, there's extravagant loss. And when those sorts of bets happen, there's often conflict. In a modern sense, imagine you're told a man goes missing, and you're also told he made big bets with a bookie all the time. What would you conclude happened? We are presented with the same situation. Carl was a big gambler and then went missing. Did he go missing because of a convoluted murder plot to kill his lover? Or because of the gambling? If I were to guess, Carl made some sort of large wager during the fair. Perhaps there was a joust or something, and then owed some merchant or someone dangerous a great deal of money, which he could not pay. He likely told Laenor, which led to the initial quarrel before the fight, and then Laenor and Carl likely went to confront the men. Laenor perhaps using his position to try to get out of the debt. And then a fight broke out. I imagine both Laenor and Carl were killed, but merchants told people that Carl went missing to blame the incident on him. Even this was not the end of the tragedies that would mark that dreadful year. The next occurred at high tide, after Sir Laenor's funeral, when king and court made the journey to Driftmark to bear witness at his pyre, many on the backs of their dragons. So many dragons were present that Septon Eustace wrote that Driftmark had become the new Valyria. And so next we get to the funeral of Laenor, which requires most of our characters to gather together on Driftmark. So while both the deaths of Laena and Laenor seem to be chance occurrences, That is, one by natural causes and the other a likely gambling dispute gone awry, we can say that Aemond losing an eye and claiming Vhagar was caused by Laenor's death. Now it's interesting that we don't hear about the funeral of Laena. Presumably it happened, and it's hard to believe that the king wouldn't attend his good sister's funeral, so it's likely, if not probable, that this entire cast of characters was just on Driftmark weeks earlier, honoring Daemon's wife passing. If everyone were here for Laena's funeral, it would have given Aemond more time to stake out his plan and make his move, but he would have also had no idea that Laenor would die, so he wouldn't know when he would return. So while it's a weird thought that there were two awkward funerals on Driftmark just weeks apart, it's an oddity that may have little consequence. Now, Septon Eustace writes that Driftmark had become a new Valyria because there were so many dragons there. There are, by the way, 11 or 12 dragons on Driftmark. Rhaenys' Meleys, Daemon's Caraxes, Rhaenyra's Syrax, Aegon's Sunfire, Helena's Dreamfire, and the riderless Seasmoke and Vhagar. And then there's perhaps 5 hatchlings. It seems weird to bring riderless dragons to a funeral, but they apparently did. We have Jace's Vermax, Luke's Arax, Joffrey's Charaxes, Daeron's Tessarion, and maybe Bela's Moondancer. Now, Eustace talking about how many dragons there are and comparing it to Old Valyria is pretty standard practice in Fire and Blood. When Maegor fought Aegon the Uncrowned, it was the first time since the Doom of Valyria that dragons fought each other in the sky. When Rhaegar Baratheon wanted Arya Targaryen to be queen, it conjured visions of Old Valyria when dragons fought dragon. When Alyssa Farman stole dragon eggs, there was a fear of a new Valyria. At the celebration of Jaehaerys' 50th year of ruling, King's Landing was said to have the most dragons since Valyria. And when King Viserys took power, it was said that there were more dragons than ever before. And so the dragon fear theme is pretty consistent throughout the story. So if one were thinking about conspiracies, one would perhaps wonder if the fear of dragons caused people to want to get rid of Laena and Laenor. And perhaps this statement happened before Laena's death. After all, prior to Laena dying, there were a lot of dragons on the island. Rhaenyra was visiting Laenor, Laena and Daemon were there, and they had betrothed Jace and Luke to Bela and Rhaena. In a sense, they were establishing a new Valyria. However, if one were going to make that statement, Dragonstone would actually be a better candidate for a new Valyria. After all, it has the Dragonmont with all of the hatchlings, and Laenor, Laena, and Daemon were visiting Dragonstone as well. So really, the statement only makes sense if Eustace was talking about the funeral. And this is a good place to stop. We will get into the loss of Aemond's eye in part 22. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.